Welcome to Naperville Notables. I'm Liz Spencer. Anderson's Bookshop is celebrating 50 years of being Naperville's bookstore, so we thought it'd be a great idea to sit down with Becky Anderson. So everybody knows Anderson's Bookshop. You drive downtown, people stop here, but do they? I don't think many people realize how long you've been here and where you started. So give me a quick
history.
A quick history
Okay,
lesson.
a quick history in 5 seconds.
Well, maybe 10, but just a little bit.
Well, being a family business, so I'm 5th generation. Some of our kids who are working in the business are 6th generation.
Wow.
But started with our great-great-grandfather, William Wallace Wickle. Came to Naperville from Pennsylvania in 1875, and he opened a pharmacy just down the street from where the store is now, and started selling all sorts of things. Because back then, Naperville was, we were nothing. We were just this little farm town. People don't realize that, there was no such thing as suburbia. There might have been some bedroom communities starting just outside of the city, but out here, no, nothing. So when you opened a store, you sold a lot more than just focusing in on one type of merchandise,
Right.
So he sold everything. We have ads that date back to like the 1880s, from a Naperville women's cookbook that was published, and it says William Wallace Wickle, druggist and bookseller, famous, whatever articles, sold in a drugstore. So there were fancy toilet articles. They even sold wallpaper. They even hung wallpaper, and it showed the kind of prices and some of the ads that it would cost to hang the wallpaper. So a store back then sold everything from compounded prescriptions to everything, but he always said druggist and bookseller. So a lot of the ads always featured books. And in some of those pictures that date back to that time and just before the turn of the last century, you see a lot of books along the top shelves. So this being a farm town, they sold a lot of books to the local schools at the time, little farm schools. So I guess we could claim that we've been selling books since that time. And, so technically it wasn't until 1964, as the business passed from generation to generation, our grandfather started our first bookstore above the drugstore because he loved books. What a voracious reader. This guy could read 6 or 8 books in a week.
Wow.
Speed reader, but somebody who could speed read and get all the content and know exactly what he's just read. So he opened the store above the pharmacy called Paperback Paradise, and it only sold paperbacks. And back then, the mass market paperback, or what you call the rack size paperbacks, dime, basically they were dimes back there. They were that smaller size paperback, and that's pretty much all we sold. So as the store expanded and moved down the street and enlarged several times, of course we added a lot more types of books, a lot more children's books, hardcovers, and then we got into a lot of other gift items.
And that's when you kind of separated pharmacy and bookstore.
Exactly. And when we started that store above, that was the first official. Yeah.
First official. And the pharmacy is where Ted's Montana Grill was.
Right. It's where Ted's is now.
Yeah, right.
But that bookstore was on that second floor. You had to climb up that flight of stairs to get to the bookstore.
Right, because anybody who's been in Ted's, that's a long building. It's deceptive of how much stuff you can get in there.
It's very long and narrow, so you could get a lot of stuff in there.
You're right. So, and this is your 50th year as a bookstore.
Right, as an official bookstore. But technically, I guess we could say I got to add back, so 139 years, right? That's right, 139 years in a way.
Yeah.
But the 50 years is a good reason to celebrate.
I say, yeah. And you think about 50 years as a bookshop now, and books are so different now than they were. Sure. You think about the paperback, which was revolutionary back there. It allowed you could carry it. It was cheap. It was accessible to everybody, which was what made, I think, paperbacks so wonderful. And now you fast forward and accessibility is a little different.
Very different. And when you think about how books, we want to be that type of bookseller that can sell you a book in any format you want, whether it's an audio book, whether it's a digital book, whether it's a physical book. But what the whole digital revolution has done to reading, it scared us for a while, because at the very beginning, when all that really started to take off, we didn't have a way to sell the device or sell the content. That means the digital book itself. But we have done several different reincarnations and have been selling ebooks pretty much since the beginning. So if you want a book in digital, we definitely have it for you. Millions and millions of titles that are accessible through Anderson's that you can read on any device except for the one proprietary one
Right.
from that big competition.
That we won't talk
that
about.
One, it starts with an A.
Right.
So we won't talk about them. But that, we want to be able to give a reader whatever they want, whatever format.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because you can shop online at Anderson's and buy a book 24 hours now.
Right. And to us, being online is essential for doing business.
Right.
And I think any good business who really feels that they have a product that they can put out there on the web, they really should do that. It's not only for putting out information about you as a business and getting that face out there, but also having that commerce.
Right.
To be able to do it on the web is essential.
Well, and this wasn't the first time you really faced a big threat as a bookstore.
No.
It's funny because, again, and we can talk a little bit about it's how this has evolved in the last 10 to 15 years. The bookstore business has been through a lot.
A ton. And it's so interesting because when you think about independent stores were the bookstores. I mean, there were bookstores in so many communities. At one point, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there were over 5,000 independent bookstores in this country.
Wow.
In communities all over, large and small, rural, suburban, urban. But then as the whole revolution of the big box chains, probably starting with Crown, with Bobby Hafted, with the whole Crown chain, and they're long gone. But then when the big superstores, which has happened to many elements of the retail strata, from lots of big box stores and corporate stores have opened. But for books, it was Borders and Barnes & Noble opening these big, huge box stores. For most of us in that scenario, when a big box corporate store like that, whether it was Borders or Barnes & Noble, would open near an independent, the minimum loss would be at least 30% in your sales,
Right.
in a short period of time. So we were scared. We were very scared, really scared,
Right, yeah.
and because we knew what could happen. But I think living in a community like this and the relationships we've built, we just made sure that we reminded people. Those friends of ours, remember who we are and what we do and who we are integral to this community. And I think we did a lot of things. We reminded a lot of people. And I think we were compared to, and I know the Naperville Sun put this as there was a 2 double-page spread about comparing us to that movie You Got Mail that had Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. And she had that small, cute little children's bookstore happening in New York. And they compared us to that. So Tom Hanks, a picture of him squishing Anderson's under his foot. So squishing Anderson's under is Tom Hanks squishing Anderson's. So.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we knew we had to fight this. And so we did. And we did a lot of fun stuff, a lot of events, just reminding people, a lot of promotion. And actually we had a great increase. We had, I think, almost an 8% increase that year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so instead of going the worst, we kind of turned it around.
Right, but I think you did something very smart, which is with these authors. Because was that really the start of the big push for authors in the store and these bigger events? Was that the...
Well, you know what, we had always hosted authors, and I think years and years and years ago, starting the author events in our store. If you build it, they'll come. And it's not just people in our community or outside the community that come to hear the author, it's also the publishers realizing that if we build the audience, they'll send us more people. And so we started small many, many years ago, and we've built on that, And I think now the celebrity book is huge,
Right.
where we didn't see that too much. A long time ago, we had Raquel Welch over at our Downers Grove store. That was one of the first big celebrity. It was an exercise book she had come out with. And that was like the first celebrity thing we'd ever done. So everybody was like, oh, Raquel Welch, what do we do? So, but I think the way the industry has changed, and I think those celebrity books drive the market to a certain degree, and the book sales. They're temporary because these aren't books that will last sometimes. Some do, most don't. They don't last in the marketplace. They aren't books that you're going to be asking for years from now. But it helps a lot to drive attention to books and to bookstores and getting audience engaged.
You talk a lot about that you've built it. I'm sure that many people in the community kind of assume that this is like an overnight success story for you. Yeah. And it hasn't been.
Yeah. It's been a struggle, though. We've worked really, really hard with building up these events. And, some don't do so well, but for the most part, we try and work, I guess, the demographic of what we think will attract for a particular voice, a particular book, a particular subject, or a genre. And we'll try and find those niches, those groups, and directly market to them. try and think of groups that we can work within our community and outside to draw interest in it that will also benefit from a particular author or a particular voice. So, it takes a lot of work. And I think there will be those occasional ones where we go, well, we tried our best. And that happens to every author, every publisher. We know what that happens. But for the most part, we have really great success. And I think people depend on us, and I've had so many people over the years say, what would we do without you for our entertainment, So that's great to hear.
It is. Well, and I think people want accessibility to the author of the book that they have fallen in love with.
Right.
They want to see who created these characters that I like so much, and I think there's a little risk for the author because, are you going to match up? So.
Right. Well, I think some of it's, you always hope when there's a book that you absolutely love, and that when you meet the author, so many times you actually love the book more. And I can probably count on just one hand where I liked the book less because of the author.
Well, that's good. That speaks well for that.
So I think when you can meet that person behind the book, I think it just enhances the whole experience. And it really makes you feel like you're part of that bigger reading community, that you're meeting with other people of like minds who enjoy reading about this subject or this particular author's works, or going to a different world. And when you can meet in groups like that, it speaks volumes.
Well, you talk about a different world and the popularity of young adults and in the dystopian worlds, and that has been, I think a real boon for you. You have really embraced the YA author and the kids.
Yeah.
Tell me why. I mean,
well, we had it was several decades ago. We've had a couple of really phenomenal people who have led our children's section, and it's also reaching out to our local schools. I mean, that's essential. I don't think any bookstore who doesn't reach out to the education world, to their school districts, to parents, to kids, to educators, you're making a big mistake. And so we got involved with working with school districts, and we do that all over the Chicagoland area and even beyond that. But I think engaging families, and because I think our goal is to make readers of us all, to be lifelong readers, and if you get kids early enough, you're gonna see them grow. And I think when it comes to the young adult stuff, there's been a huge volume increase in the amount of young adult literature that's written. That 12 and up, and now there's even the older YA, and now there's even a new genre they're trying to call young adult. So what they're trying to do is get those young adult readers going all the way through adult books, and getting them reading, certain types of books that they thought they liked maybe when they were 11 or 12 years old. But that whole genre has exploded, and there's so many authors, and we have seemed to really tie in to readers with those types of books. And we've had tons of young adult events, and really champion a lot of those authors, and helped get them on the map, and help readers discover them. And that sort of spreads like wildfire, because when people love something, they love to tell somebody, especially a book. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again.
Well, I have to say, some of the young adult novels are really good. I don't really care that they're aimed at young adults. I'm like, wow, this is really good.
No, and we have tons of adult crossover readers. And it's so amazing to me when we have a young adult author here, and you think, oh, well, we're going to have a bunch of teenagers here. I'm not even sure teenagers, let's say young adults. But we have so much crossover. I'll never forget for one of the Stephanie Meyer events we did. We had a whole women's book group show up. They had made their own Stephanie Meyer T-shirts. But it's great to see, because I think in a young adult book, more so than for maybe an adult book, you can get a really compact story and maybe lesser pages, but get all the elements that you're looking for. Yeah.
So when you think about the young adult reader, and you think about growing up in a bookstore, how was that for you?
Growing up in the bookstore?
Yeah.
Well, when I started working when I was 11 years old in our drugstore, and it was after we'd had a fire, a cigar case, when we still sold tons of cigars. A humidifier caught fire, and it caught the store on fire in the middle of the night. And that was my job after the fires, wiping soot off of shelving and all sorts of stuff. And so I worked in the drugstore for a long time from that point on, and then started working in the bookstore. But I remember little going upstairs to the bookshop, walking up the stairs, and just loving being amongst the books and the smell, And even to this day, any bookstore I walk into, that's the smell. There's just something really comforting about the smell of a bookstore. But I think working there, I worked through high school, I worked in college at the bookstore, and I worked at our Downers Grove store, and it was one of those things when I went away to college, and then after getting married, we moved down south. I never thought I'd be back in the business. So it drew me back, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let's talk, yeah, because you did, it was not your plan to be in the family business.
No.
Yeah.
I think after we moved away, I wasn't expecting to come back to the family business. I just kind of thought that was it. And so moving back up to the Chicagoland area, because my husband's he's in large commercial construction. You know, he was working on a big building downtown Chicago, the AT&T building. That's what brought him back. And we moved back up, and a key employee left our book fair company, and they asked me to step in. And that was all, that was it.
That was it.
Yeah, I'm stuck. I'm there.
You're there.
Yeah.
When you went off to college and that, what were you thinking you were going to do if you weren't going to be in the family business? Because your majors are interesting. I didn't know you sang.
I did some of that.
Yeah, I didn't know you had the big music background and German.
German and history. So
And
it was.
history,
I
yeah.
had a triple major, but it was one of those things where I thought I would probably go into education, but it was one of those things where my mom taught school for many years, elementary school,
Right.
and I thought, I'll try that. But I took some elementary education classes, and it just wasn't. I didn't think it was my thing. So I got a triple major. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. It was one of those things where I think a lot of us who major in the humanities, I think we just love so much of that. A liberal arts education is what it is. It gives you so much background and a lot of things that really enrich your life. But narrowing that down to a specific career, I never did that. So I think what I did prepared me perfectly for this in a way. And just the love of arts, the love of words, of language, all that. And words are music, when you think about it. So I think a lot of it did prepare me okay for that. Yeah.
That's great. And I think, because I think we just always assume that, this was the plan.
No, that was not the plan. I think only, the four of us, I think only one really wanted to be the bookstore was his plan.
And would that be Trey or Pete?
That'd be Trace. Yeah.
So you're the youngest?
I'm next to the youngest.
Next to younger, you're the only girl. So tell me a little bit about the sibling makeup here.
Well, growing up with three brothers, it was. I will admit it was hard being a girl. So basically, you did everything they did. So I grew up pretty much a tomboy, very shy, very, very shy. But I did everything they did, So I remember even dressing up playing tackle football all the time and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love football. That was great. I love watching football, all that kind of stuff. But I think. But when you get a little bit older, it makes it a little harder being the only girl.
Yeah.
When things start to change and all
Yes,
that.
yeah.
So I got teased a lot. I think we were siblings that teased and fought a lot. But I guess it makes you tougher, and
Well, you've got you're fifth generation. You've got the sixth generation
right.
up and coming. So something with the family business is working.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? Family businesses are not easy. They are definitely not easy. But you know what? In a way, when you are a family business, I think it makes it easier to relate to your community and making a family out of not only your customers, but especially your employees. I think that's key. And making everybody feel that they're a part of a bigger thing. So I think that part of family is the part that expresses it well. And I think when you have, you bring your children to work, and my kids all grew up in this business. But I think when you bring your children to work and they're involved, and I think that shows the larger community, the larger family of employees and customers and readers, that we're all a big family in this. Yeah.
Right, because you've had some of the key staff for years.
Oh, we've had some people who've been here for a really long time. We take great pride in that because I think they are family, and it's sad when they decide to retire. So we just had a retirement party for 3 of our employees a couple of weeks ago.
Right, and they were how many years?
We had one with 20, one with 21, I believe, and another one who had worked 2 different periods. She was here early on when the store had just moved down the street to our current location, and then left for a few years and came back. So she had 2 different stints. So I think that was over 20 years too.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we've had some people who I think they just love this, and I think also too when people come and work in our businesses, they create such wonderful friendships with each other. Yeah. So it's a great place because I think what we're talking about are ideas, and to me, there's a book that you can pick up that will, on any subject, any emotion, anything that, there's so many books that can help so many different things. And when you can discuss that with other people or fellow employees, I think it creates a bond. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's key to success.
Yeah.
But you talked a little bit about being shy.
Yes.
Yes, and when you and I have talked about being shy before, because people are surprised when they say, "Oh," you say, "Oh my gosh, I was shy."
Yeah.
How did you overcome that? Because that would certainly not be what I would call you now.
No, and people say that they can't believe it, but growing up I was it was painfully shy. I mean, I was just so shy to the point where I didn't even like going up to anyone in a store and asking a question. Or it was preventing me from doing a lot of things. And I think what brought me out of the shell, my mom would even say, I remember even being with her at drugs, when CB's was across the street, that's where we did our grocery shopping. I would go in there with her, and I'd be with her shopping, and she would meet somebody. My mother always would see somebody she knows and starts talking, and I would just be off on the side, and they would say hi, and my mother, "Oh, don't worry about Becky, she's just shy." I remember saying that. It was one of those things where I was dreadfully shy. But I think it was this business that brought me out of it. I had to, and it started mostly with our wholesale company where we do book fairs, and that's what I got involved in when I came back into the business. And that part of the business has moved a bunch of times in different locations, and we now have a warehouse in Aurora where we do our business out of. But it was one of those places where I figured we had to get out and someone had to talk to our customers. We had to hold seminars to tell schools and librarians and parent volunteers how to run a book fair. And my brother Pete didn't want to do that. He didn't want to be the one to get. So I made myself. And I think it was forcing myself, that I knew that I had to get up in front of people and express, what your mission is, what your goal is. And I think books have made it easier for me, to tell you the truth. Talking about books.
Right, because it wasn't on you. Right,
it wasn't on me, but it was great to be able to talk about other stories, other people, other lands, other places altogether. And that was the beauty of it, was I think that it was easy for me to talk about that because I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel reserved. I felt like I just had to get it out to talk about this great story.
Right, well, and you had the knowledge in the room, too.
Well, yeah. But so that every time it got easier and easier and easier. So it's been a process.
It's been a process. But I think that's nice to hear, because I think we all have those times in our lives that, it's like, I gotta step it up a notch, whether it be shy or just pushing out on something that, and it's a process. I think
it's totally out of your comfort zone. And my comfort zone was very small. But I really had to get out of it. So.
Well, and look at you now. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, really, if you think about it, I mean, Anderson's has been, the bookstore of the year. You have been, compared to, I think the only other bookstore people might know about nationwide is Paul's. I mean, you're in that. I mean, it's a nationally recognized brand.
Yeah. Well,
isn't it awesome?
Yeah. Well, we're very proud of that, and I think, but a lot of us have worked very hard in order to make that happen, and. I think one of the things that has helped tremendously with all of that is the more events we get, the more involved we are, the more we reach out and partner with so many different groups. It sort of spreads the word. And I think just the fun that we create in a lot of the events we do, that's what gets out. When the author has a great time, or an illustrator, or any person who attends an event, or in a group that we partner with, if everybody has a great time or is moved or whatever happens at an event, they create some really positive energy. You can't beat that kind of message. It's viral the way it goes out. And I think we've created a lot of those. Yeah.
Right, but a lot of that is making those national connections. I mean, you've sat on many national boards. Yeah. And that is really out of the comfort zone.
Well, you know what? I was president of two different book-selling national organizations. One was the Association of Booksellers for Children, and then for 7 years I was on the American Booksellers Board, and then was president for the last couple of years. That, to me, was a great experience, because I got to see and talk to authors and people at the heads of all the major publishing houses in the world and sit at their tables and talk to about issues that are facing not only us as independents, but the book and authors and what gets out into the world and how do we create a fair marketplace for what this industry is trying to do. And to me, that was an opportunity to really see people from all over the country, see other stores around the country, but also talk to booksellers in other countries and speak at conferences in Australia and New Zealand and England and Germany and Belgium, but to go to places and talk to other booksellers around the world and realize that we're all in this together. We may be in a different language, but we're still facing the same issues, the same problems, the same competition.
Right, because we're global now.
We're global. But also to share what we each do in our own communities and countries and sharing those best practices. I mean, that was huge.
Yeah, pretty neat. Because I think you guys are very innovative with the events you put on. You know, whether that be, I mean, and we'll talk about, you know, the Harry Potter.
I mean,
it closed down the street and had just a huge, record-breaking number of people who show up for that book release. And the fact that, and you and I have talked about it before, that you had a pretty good sense that J.K. Rowling was going to have a hit on her hands.
We did.
What made you when you read that first book?
You know what? I don't think we're ever going to see another phenomenon like that. I know it won't be in my lifetime that we're going to see a series of books like this that children and adults equally will get involved in and really take to heart, because those kids who read Harry Potter, I know they're readers for life. There's no doubt about it. Those kids are readers for life.
You're all looking for another Harry Potter.
That's right. They're looking for something else. And I think with a book like that, when we got the advanced readers copies of it, and a few of us read it on staff, and we all knew that it was going to be something totally special. And so that was a book that we, even before we could sell it, before we had the finished copies in our hands, we were talking to people about it. And that's what we do. I think any bookseller like what we do, you have to be the loudmouth. You have to be the evangelist, you know, and then you want to get other people to be evangelists for that book too. So Harry Potter was a perfect example of how that becomes like a disease. You want to spread it, spread it fast.
It's a good disease.
It's a great disease. And so Harry Potter was one of those things where it was huge. And because of our love for it, when we expressed it to the publisher, they sent her our way. The book had already been published, the first book in the UK already, and then came out a little bit later. And I remember sitting next to her at a dinner in Chicago when she was going to come and do the event in the store, and just talking to her. And she was very shy, very unassuming, and just talking to her about her daughter and then my youngest. And it was so interesting to have a conversation like that, and then to see what happened to her and a series of books and how something could become just beyond anyone's imagination. But when we had her in the store here, it was a daytime event during the school day, and we got about 80 kids and teachers, and we have pictures of them sitting on the floor with her talking to them. And how would you like to have been one of those kids to know what happened later? But I think she was really shy. She was sitting at a table talking to them all. And but it was a really cool event. But then to see what happened with the second book and then the third book, she came back again for the third book, and by then, in a very short time, it exploded. It had exploded. And I think for us, we brought in the book by the hundreds at the very beginning with the first book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and we checked our competition around the corner.
That's good.
We had hundreds here, and they had 2 on the shelf. It shows you the difference when you have the power to get behind something you love.
Right. Well, it's the difference between independent and corporate.
Well,
you can make the call.
We can make the call, and we can make it locally.
That's right.
And it's local. And so when she came for the third book, oh my gosh, we moved it to Naperville Central High School, and I think we had over 5,000 people show up. They couldn't all get through the line, but it was just phenomenal. And we could see the change in her though too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what a phenomenal idea coming from that mind.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
Right. Full circle. Wow.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You also did something very clever this past year.
Right.
With April Fools.
Oh, right.
You had it was I was glad that we got tipped off,
Right.
because we posted it for you, where we said you were under new management,
Right.
and we actually had a couple of people call us and say, "Oh my God, what happened? What's the story?" So we even had a local media outlet, fooled for a little bit too. So that was really clever. How'd you think of that idea? What made you do it?
Well, I'll tell you who put me up to it.
Okay.
His name is Craig Poplars, and he is the head of publicity and marketing at Algonquin Books, who published the book. And it was about the A.J. Fickrey book. And the book is all about an independent bookstore owner and the love of books and what it does in a small place. And it spoke to us so much, but I think it speaks to any reader. It's just an absolutely beautiful book. And so Craig said, well, hey, why don't you do like an April Fool's thing? Because the book was coming out on April Fool's, I mean, the actual release day. He said, why don't you do an April Fool's and, do something like, if something's changing at Anderson. So we took it a lot further than that.
You scared us all.
We took it a lot further. And oh my gosh, we got emails and tweets and stuff from all over the country. People all worried that we had changed and we had sold the store. But when they found out it was a joke, they said it was the best April Fool's they've ever experienced. So it was fun. We had a blast doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite the clever idea, and it's truly what an April Fool's joke is all about. I mean, you guys really captured the essence of that.
But I think it was also too to celebrate a wonderful book. You know, the storied life of A.J. Fickrey, and Gabrielle Zeman then came a few weeks after that, and she had the most fun, and we had a great turnout for them to see her. So it just kind of came full circle. The whole point of it was to get attention to a great book, and also to our business. But I think if we don't have fun, then we got to stop doing this, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and not only are you booksellers, but you're really event planners too. There's a lot of party planning, event planning that goes into all this.
Right. There's a lot.
There's a lot as a marketer. And when you think about that, I mean, you're in charge of the bookstore part of this family operation, correct?
And I also work with our wholesale company too.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is it like being the woman in this business and in the bookstore industry business? Let's talk there first.
Well, you know what? I think if you look at independent bookstores, I think over 50 to 60% are owned by women. So I think we're more in the majority than men when it comes to independent stores. So yay, us women, and I think when it comes to party planning, do we do it better than guys? Maybe we do.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I think we're always assumed that we're the ones that are going to be doing the party. Right.
But I think maybe it's the details, the little things that make the difference. And there are guys who can do it just as well. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to diss any guys on this one. But it's one of those things where it's fun to plan this stuff and add the little details that do make it special. And whether it's a conference we've created, or whether it's an event, or it's something we can partner with a not-for-profit, or take something to a school and help that school change their school for that day into the world of that book. If we can help any school or any organization or ourselves or an off-site event change it and create something special, literally we can create moments that are memorable, that we will remember for a lifetime. And we have seen it many, many times, especially with kids' events, where kids will remember these for a lifetime.
Right. Well, and that's awesome, but it's also a lot of responsibility.
We don't want anything to flop or be a total bomb. But you know what? I think for me, this part of the business is the most exciting and the most fun.
Yeah.
It's creating those things and working at trying to get those people to come to Naperville.
Right.
And when we know we can make that happen, and it's been over the last number of years what we're getting, it just seems like we're getting volumes of wonderful, wonderful people that come. So we're excited about that.
And Naperville's excited about that as well. They really benefit, because you bring a lot of culture and a lot of the nation and the world to Naperville with these big authors. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about leadership style. You've got big operation. You got a number of employees. How do you do it all? How do you lead? What's your style? Do you have a style?
You know what? I've never thought too much about that style, but in a way though, I want to give people autonomy to do what they think is the right thing, to have fun with it. To be as creative as they can. And I think having the right people in management and the people heading up our marketing and publicity and the person who does all of the way we communicate outside through social networking and our website, that's really important that I have those right people. So having those meetings and then just discussing it and letting them go for it, that's more my style than trying. I'm not a micromanager. I probably keep too much stuff on my plate, which is not a good thing. But I think allowing them to be creative and go with it. And when you find those key employees that think ahead of you, and I've got several of those who just do some really creative, great things. So I think that kind of management is just creating different types of meetings and groups where we discuss things and then they go for it. So.
And we have similar styles where I joke that I just get them going and then I just try to keep up. Go ahead, I'll be behind you.
Right,
you're coming along.
Yeah, and listen, I can tell by the people you have at the station the incredible things they do and how excited they are about what they're doing. Because when you do that, that does.
Well, it's both of us have jobs that are not the norm, and we get to meet interesting people, and I tell interesting stories. You read and meet people who create interesting stories in a book format. Yeah, so it's a similar world, but differently. Right. So that kind of brings me a little bit to where I get to tell stories. I'm telling one right now and interviewing people, and that's the absolute favorite part of my job. Right. What do you do for creativity? Do you read a lot? I want to talk about what you read. And Dan, do you write? Do you do anything? I found out you had music background recently, so that surprised me. Well, do you play an instrument?
I play the piano mostly. Yeah. I sit down and play the piano when I need to do that, and once in a while I'll pull out my old clarinet. But it's mostly the piano. I love playing the piano. But I think writing. So many people have said, "Oh, you should just write. You got to write." Because especially my family. My husband tells me that all the time. Because weird scenarios come out of my head all the time. Sometimes you say them out loud, and he says, "Oh, you should write that." I have thought about that, but it's finding the time to do it. It's not hard to fill up your time with because you want to do so many things, and that's my problem is reining myself in, because of all the things that I think we could do or create, as a business. But the creative side, I think that's probably the creative side is how can we make things really cool, really fun, and that to me, that's great, because if I can get different people engaged and thinking of creatively, then it sort of just grows. It's sort of, So I think that's maybe the creative part. Writing, I have thought about that. I just haven't sat down seriously and given it a chunk of time.
Because you read a lot. I'm just amazed by.
Well, I try.
Well, and it's part of the job, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But so you're exposed to a lot of different writing styles, and every writer will tell you that the first key to writing is to read.
Right. Oh yeah. Any writer when I interview them, are the ones who it's writers on reading, and any writer worth their salt is a voracious reader. And that's why those questions I always ask them, there's never a problem. It's a problem that they're just trying to figure out how can they distill it down to one or two. Right. And that is the problem. But reading, you really have to, especially when you're going to talk to educators and to parents. You really have to read those books. We don't feel confident in recommending books unless we read them ourselves, putting that stamp of approval on them. As adult books, though, I'm a fast reader.
I was going to ask.
If the writing is not good, then I really read fast. If the writing, that's when you're skimming it.
You're flipping right because you can guess the plot.
And because it might be a book that you have to read, and we won't name any authors on that one. Yeah. But when it comes to beautiful writing, and writing that it literally takes you to another place, or the words, and you might want to read that passage again, then I'm going to read a little slower. Yeah, but I'm a pretty fast reader. Yeah.
Do you think that you get that from great-great-grandfather there?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, because he was a very fast reader. But it's you can tell the difference in writing, what's good or not. And whether it's nonfiction or fiction, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right. There's some people that,
Some people who can just engage you like with nonfiction like you are reading fiction, and that to me is a real talent.
Me too. I'm in constant envy of those folks. Yes. So, they have my attention too. So when you're thinking about bookstores and the future for books, what do we think is going to happen? What do you think?
I think for independent stores, our numbers are growing, which is really great.
They had a big dip, and now they're back.
They had a big dip. When the chains really were very prevalent, starting with Crown and the Borders and the B&Ns and the Books A Millions and all the other chains that, and they have since, of course, one has gone totally away.
Right.
And the others have closed locations around the country. Our numbers are growing now after a big dip where that was knocking off a bunch of independent stores to very sadly around the country. But our numbers are growing, and they've been growing for the last 3 or 4 years, which is great. So independents are on the way back. But I think when it comes to reading, I heard another statistics that less than half of our population read a book at all last year.
Do you think social media is
I
threatening the
think
written
social
word?
media, I mean, people said that about television when it first came around.
Yes, they did,
They
right.
probably even said it about radio way back when, I don't know.
They probably did.
But with television, but I think social media, I think playing games online, people are always engaged in that. It's always strikes me when you take a flight somewhere and somebody has a tablet, but they're not reading most of the time. They're watching a television show that they've downloaded or a movie, or they're playing a game. And to me, reading, it's critical because we've seen this time and time again. If you keep kids reading through 5th or 6th grade, even if they leave it as high schoolers and in college because of required reading, they're going to come back as adults. So I think that's the key, is keeping those kids. So that, to me, is engaging so many kids in authors that really just light their fire. And that maybe they'll read that series of books, but then they'll go on to something else. But I think people forget the power of what reading can do. And there's been several studies that show when you read more than any other activity that you can do, it lowers your blood pressure. And the obvious reason is that when you read, it takes you away.
Yeah, it takes you to a different place.
It takes you to a different place. And it could be nonfiction, too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of those thrillers that I read that I don't think that lowers my blood pressure when I'm worried my main character is going to get killed off, or better be looking behind her or him.
Right.
Yeah.
But it may that kind of rise in blood pressure might be okay for you.
That's
know?
right.
That's right. But it's the stuff that's really, the stress and everything that we have every day. And also, too, they've found in many studies that reading makes us more empathetic people. And that's really important. And I think it's really important, even so much of the fiction that's out there, and even nonfiction, learning about the world does make us more empathetic. So the power of it, and I think, they're finding that physical books, and there was just a new study about that too, the way you retain the information is that reading digitally, or when you're on a computer or any kind of digital device, you don't retain what you've just read as well as you do on paper. And I'm going, yay.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, and that's helpful for you.
Right.
Well, and I just think there's just so much to do these days too, with the advent of the tablets. I mean, I know as NCTV, we're cutting up our shows and our media in bite-sized pieces, just so that you can have it anytime you want it.
Yeah.
So because we know your attention span is about 7 to 8 minutes.
Right. And that's
and
too
you have
bad.
so much to do.
So how do we help people develop a longer attention span? Because
I think people, and I think we all have that fear of not being in the know, or not being, being left out.
Sure.
So we all are running to catch up. But I think if we were smarter, perhaps, or listening to our own wisdom, that we might just choose 2 or 3 things rather than 6 or 7. But I fall guilty on everything too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there was just something in the Tribune, or was it New York Times over the weekend, talking about the Sunday news shows.
Yes.
People aren't watching them like they used to, like Meet the Press and the Sunday CBS Morning News with Bob Schieffer, on Sunday morning. And even though he gets a pretty good viewership, but people don't want to sit there and watch the political news of the day, which is kind of sad in a way, because the more you know, the more informed electorate you are in many ways.
Right, but it's the time. I'd be curious to see if
they did it at a different time. Would they watch? Yeah.
Or even if they, and some of I think the networks, you can certainly watch their entire episodes, and then they watch, and then you can watch the stories, but they're not cutting it up necessarily, the program.
Right.
I'd be wondering what their digital numbers are.
Sure.
As we think about it, because we have to sit and we've all gotten used to the DVR, which fast forwards through commercials.
Oh, sure.
So we're saving ourselves time.
Right.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Everything, we can control it all. The content we want to watch and how we want to watch it.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so for you, do you have thoughts of having that sixth generation continue on?
Yes, we do. We do. We hope so.
How many of that generation are currently involved? Or how many are in that generation?
Well, right now, working full time right now, the only person we have right now is my niece Katie. This is Trace's daughter. She's only girl with 3 brothers too,
Okay.
so we relate.
Yeah, I was going to say, good bond there.
Right, but Katie is in the business now, so, and I hope, I still have another in college, and you never know, it could be like me, coming back into the business, and that could well be true. So there's still 5 of our kids still in college.
Right, because there's a total of 14 in
Well,
the
there's
sixth?
13, but the ones involved in the book business, there's 9.
Okay.
So of the 9, there are still 5 of them still in college.
Oh.
So we still have hope.
Yes, you do, because lots can change in those years.
That's very true.
And there's a lot of theory about, especially for family business, to have them go out and come back in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah, they learn a lot, and then
That's
they're coming back because they want to, not because they are told to.
Right.
That's exactly it.
That's it.
One of the things you do Authors Revealed for us, which we love, and one of the things you always do at the end is a quick quiz. You call it lightning round.
Yeah,
so
right.
I thought it'd be just big fun to do that with you. And see what you read and what you like, and then I'll chime in on the ones I have answers for.
Okay, I want to know what you, Liz, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Okay, well, I don't know if I'll have all the great answers, but let's go. Okay, so favorite book as a child. And a child, I'd say, child through like 5th grade.
Okay, I loved reading animal stories back then. And I remember reading a book called The Wolfling.
Okay.
By Sterling North. He was the same one who wrote Rascal. Do you remember the story about the raccoon?
Yes, I loved it. Yes.
Well, he wrote a book called Wolfing about a boy up in Wisconsin in the 1800s who had a wolf pup for a pet, and I so wanted a wolf for a pet.
So had I read that, I so would want that too.
That's
right.
right.
I so wanted that raccoon.
Yeah, right. But there were many stories like That Quail Robert. I love that book. Ring of Bright Water, which was about otters. These are all nonfiction,
Right.
And Wolfling was fiction, but I loved all those animal stories. And I remember reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I remember reading the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And the other thing I remember going to the library in elementary school, I read all the books. You were there with George Washington when he crossed the Delaware. It was all these history books.
Right, no,
you were there. Do you remember those? You were
yes,
there? I read those, and I read a lot of sports biographies because I literally, when I was young, wanted to be Dick Butkus, so playing football. So, but I read a lot of sports books. So that's the kind of stuff I read when I was young.
How about Encyclopedia Brown?
I never read those when I was young.
So I would definitely say it was a favorite. Or,
was it?
Yes. Or how about Ralph and the Motorcycle?
Oh, I read those.
Right.
Those Beverly Cleary books?
Yes.
Oh, those are great.
Those were great. And I thought Judy Blume was great, too.
Judy Blume. And you know what? They've just reissued all of those with new covers, so they're all getting new life again.
That's right. And they all still are very contemporary. And
they are. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Blubber, and all those books.
Fudge.
Fudge.
Right, yeah. Yes.
And Deanie,
right.
some of for the older ones.
Right,
Yeah.
just those books that, had a character that was, the same age as I was and maybe with a similar angst or struggle at the time. So I thought that was great.
Well, it's important for you, and that's why, it's the struggle now of getting more books for children of color in what's being published. Kids want to see themselves in books, and it's really important.
Or whether it's a kid or maybe it's a character kid, maybe of another world. They're okay with that.
Right, because if they're still struggling through the same emotional stuff.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the world is.
Right, right, or what planet they're from at the time.
Sure. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if they're a vampire.
A vampire. Yeah.
Right. So I can't imagine that you can answer this in one book, but you are an evangelist for books and everything. So try to narrow it down to one or two that you are currently right now.
I'm currently reading. I am reading right now, just about done with it. It's a book called The High Divide, and it's by Lynn Anger. And it's a beautiful historical fiction. It's written, it takes place about 10 years after the Civil War on the plains of Minnesota going west, about a man who's left his family because, and I don't want to give too much away, but he's searching for redemption of what he had done after the war when he served with the 7th Cavalry. and Custer.
Okay.
Really, really wonderful book, and the writing is exquisite. So that's a book I'm taking my time on.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
I like the story of redemption, and Snow Falcon.
Yeah.
I can't remember the author, and it's
Oh,
several years
yeah.
old, but that one's and he raises a falcon. It's a strong story of
Yeah,
redemption.
yeah.
I am currently reading Engines of Change
Okay, yeah.
because, as you know, I'm a documentary producer,
Yes,
so I'm
that's a
working
good
on
one.
an
There you go.
doc. So a
Yeah.
lot of my time is spent reading books that I need to, but it opens my world into things that I would not have read
Yeah.
otherwise, and
Right.
and it's very entertaining. I'm enjoying the car stories.
Okay, yeah, great.
How about a guilty pleasure read?
Well, one thing, and I always ask authors this, you know, I include magazines in that, and I
Okay.
love Entertainment Magazine, because that's what keeps me up on what's coming out in movies, because I always want to know what books are being made into movies and that sort of thing. But I guess like a series that I would call guilty pleasure reads, a lot of people would not.
Okay.
Some people call them romances. I call them more historical fiction. These are the Diana Gabaldon books.
Okay. Yeah.
They all take place in Scotland in the 18th century. But it's about a time-traveling World War II nurse who goes back in time.
I have to look at that.
But it has the volume. They're very thick volumes, but it includes tons of stuff, research that she's done on the historical period, but also on medicine and everything. It was a prop at the time, and it's just really
Your
great.
guilty pleasures are really thick books.
They're really thick books. They're 900 pages per, and she's on. I think she's just finished, and it's out now. The 8th book.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
all that long.
See, I'm reading like Janet Ivanovich and the Stephanie
Right.
Plum.
Well, those go on.
They do. Well, she's like on number 20, and now I unfortunately can probably figure out what's going to happen to poor
Right,
Stephanie,
right.
But they're still very enjoyable.
Oh yeah, those Stephanie Plum books are
Yeah,
great.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's everybody's hot mess of a sister. And you're not thinking that you want to be that. So
Right, exactly.
So
yeah.
yeah, I guess I wouldn't have guessed that. So, what books did you read to your kids?
You know what? We read a lot of stuff out loud, but when they were really young, my favorite picture books to share with them, anything by Rosemary Wells, like Hazel's Amazing Mother or any of those. Also, Kevin Hankes did the best picture books and still are. So Weekend with Wendell and all those types of books. And then anything by John Cheska, because it made them laugh and made me laugh. Those are the kind of books I love to talk to parents and to educators about, especially picture books that make us as adults laugh as much as it can a young child.
Well, I think that's
I think it's a key.
Yeah, it is. I think it's the secret of children's books. I think of Dr. Seuss because the sleep book is my all-time favorite.
Well, yeah.
And and he was so clever, and that's
Oh yeah. And there's stuff that makes an adult. You get it from a different angle as a child. Well, but you'll laugh together.
That's right.
And I think those books, those are key, just key. Yeah, the ones that make you laugh. Yeah.
Well, Becky, I thank you for sitting down with us.
Oh.
It's nice to be able to interview you, and I'm sure your authors are thinking, yes, finally, I'm getting to talk to Becky rather than Becky interviewing all the authors. So.
Well, thanks, Liz. Great questions.
Well, good. Well, thanks.
Yeah,
Congratulations on 50 years
Okay.
of the bookshop.
Thank you.
That
very much.
is an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I know
Thank
that, I don't think it would go, I think Naperville and the bookshop have grown together a lot, and so.
We really have, and we've benefited greatly by the growth of the city. But we hope that we've, with everything that we do, that we're making it a community that enriches it, and we enrich each other. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks, Liz.